The harsh winter winds howled across the fjords of Vestfold as Ragnar Drengsson, a lanky youth of 18 summers, trudged through the mud toward his father's modest farmstead. The year was 843, and while the great jarls prepared their longships for the spring raids, Ragnar's world consisted of tending sheep, planting crops, and dreaming of adventures he would never have. Ragnar! The sheep have broken through the eastern fence again, his father shouted from the doorway of their small wooden farmhouse. Dreng the Elder was a broken man, his glory days long behind him after a Saxon spear had crippled his leg during a raid on Northumbria. What remained was bitterness, mead, and a son who reminded him too much of his former self. "I'll see to it, father," Ragnar called back, adjusting the rough-spun wool tunic that hung loosely from his broad shoulders. Though tall, he lacked the muscled bulk of the warriors who trained daily with sword and axe. His hands were calloused from plowing, not from gripping weapons. As Ragnar rounded the hill toward the eastern pasture, he noticed a raven perched atop the broken fence post. It stared at him with unusual intensity, its glossy black feathers reflecting the weak winter sunlight. Ragnar paused, remembering the tales of Odin's ravens, Hugin and Munin, Thought and Memory, who flew across Midgard gathering information for the All-Father. "Have you come with messages from Odin himself?" Ragnar joked, speaking to the bird as he approached the fence. The raven remained still, its eyes following him as he began repairing the broken section. The bird suddenly let out a loud call that echoed across the silent fields, then took flight, circling Ragnar's head 3 times before disappearing into the dense forest that bordered their land, the forbidden woods where, according to local law, the ancient burial mounds of kings lay hidden. Ragnar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. 3 circles, a sign from the gods, perhaps? His grandmother had taught him to recognize such omens before she passed to Hel's realm 2 winters ago. That night, as Ragnar lay on his straw pallet listening to his father's drunken snores, the raven returned, tapping insistently at the small window opening. Following a strange compulsion, Ragnar slipped outside into the moonlight. The raven led him deep into the forest, to a moss-covered burial mound he had never dared approach before. The entrance stone had been mysteriously moved aside, revealing a dark passageway lined with ancient runes. "This is madness," Ragnar whispered to himself, but he couldn't resist the pull of fate, what the Norse called wyrd, that seemed to draw him forward. Inside the burial chamber, illuminated by an inexplicable blue light, lay the remains of a long-dead king, surrounded by treasures meant to accompany him to Valhalla. Upon the skeleton's brow sat a crown of extraordinary craftsmanship, silver twisted into the shapes of ravens, wolves, and dragons, with amber stones that seemed to glow within a fire. As Ragnar approached, transfixed, the crown began to pulse with light. When he reluctantly extended his hand toward it, the crown leapt from the skeleton's brow and onto his head. Pain and visions flooded his mind, battles, feasts in great halls, ships cutting through stormy seas, and faces of kings long dead. "What trickery is this?" he gasped, trying to remove the crown, but it seemed fused to his head. As suddenly as it had begun, the pain ceased, and the crown loosened, allowing him to remove it. In his hands, it felt warm, alive. The raven called from the entrance, urging him to leave. Clutching the crown, Ragnar fled the burial chamber, his mind reeling with what had just occurred. By the time he reached his home, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten with the promise of dawn. He hid the crown beneath his sleeping pallet, convinced he had either been blessed or cursed by the gods. 3 days later, as Ragnar worked the fields alone, a company of warriors approached their farm. Leading them was Jarl Halvard Thorson, the most powerful man in the region, astride his magnificent stallion. The Jarl's mail gleamed in the spring sunshine, and his red cloak billowed behind him like a flag of blood. "Where is the one who bears the raven crown?" the Jarl demanded, his voice carrying across the field. Ragnar froze, the wooden plough still in his hands. How could the Jarl know about the crown? "There is no crown here, my lord," Ragnar replied, bowing his head respectfully. "Just a poor farm and its keepers." The Jarl dismounted, striding toward Ragnar with purpose. He was a fearsome sight, battle-scarred, with a braided beard and eyes that had witnessed countless deaths. The Saxona, our most powerful Volva, saw it in her visions. The ancient crown of King Sigurd has chosen a new bearer after 3 centuries. The signs pointed here. He scrutinized Ragnar's face. You have been marked by the gods, boy. Your eyes, they have changed. Ragnar had not seen his reflection since the night in the burial mound, but he had felt different, as though something ancient now lived within him. Before he could respond, his father emerged from the farmhouse, hobbling on his crutch. What business brings Jarl Halvard to our humble farm? Dreng asked, suspicion evident in his voice. The Raven Crown has chosen a king, the Jarl replied. And the signs led us here. Dreng laughed bitterly. A king? Here? I have only a son who dreams when he should work, who reads runes when he should be learning to farm. No king's blood flows in our veins, Jarl. The Jarl's eyes never left Ragnar. The crown chooses not by blood, but by the will of the gods. Where is it, boy? Under the intense gaze of the warriors, Ragnar returned to the house and retrieved the crown from its hiding place. When he emerged with it, gasps arose from the assembled warriors. In the daylight, the crown was even more magnificent, clearly not the work of mortal smiths, but of dwarven craftsmanship, perhaps from the forge of Sindri himself. The legends are true, whispered the Jarl, reaching for the crown. As his fingers neared it, blue flames erupted from the metal, forcing him to withdraw his hand with a curse. It seems the crown has indeed made its choice, the Jarl said, his expression unreadable. By ancient law, I must acknowledge its will. But know this, farm boy, many will challenge you, and I cannot promise to stand as your shield. Thus began Ragnar's unlikely journey from farm boy to claimant of the ancient kingdom of Vestfold. The Jarl insisted he come to the great hall at Kaupang to be presented to the Thing, the assembly where free men gathered to settle disputes and make laws. As Ragnar departed his home, his father's parting words were bitter, the gods give with one hand and take with the other. Remember that when you're sleeping in a king's bed with a knife at your throat. In Kaupang, Ragnar was thrust into a world he had only heard of in stories. The great hall of Jarl Halvard was filled with warriors, traders, and thralls, all gathered to witness the farm boy who would be king. Ragnar stood before them in his simple tunic, the magnificent crown upon his brow, feeling like an impostor. The crown has chosen, announced the Jarl to the assembled crowd. Not a warrior born, not a Jarl's son, but this, Ragnar Drengsson, a farmer's boy. Laughter and jeers erupted from many of the warriors. Let him prove his worth, shouted Thorstein, the Jarl's own nephew and heir. Let him show he can wield a sword before we bend knee to a sheep tender. The crowd roared its approval at this challenge. Ragnar felt his face flush with shame and anger. He had practiced in secret with a wooden sword since boyhood, mimicking the movements of warriors he had observed, but he had never faced a true opponent. Before he could respond, the main doors of the hall burst open. A party of strangers entered, foreigners by their dress, though they moved with the confidence of those accustomed to power. At their center was a young woman whose beauty caused the hall to fall silent. She was tall and proud, with hair the color of wheat fields at harvest. Her dress was not Norse, but of finely woven cloth in the Saxon style, though she wore a cloak pinned with a brooch bearing Norse designs. Most striking were her eyes, one blue, one green, that surveyed the hall with calm authority. The emissary from Northumbria, announced the Jarl's steward. Lady Lyra Sutton, daughter of Alderman Sutton of Bebenberg. Ragnar could not take his eyes from her. An enemy, a Saxon, yet something about her called to him like the northern lights that danced above the winter skies. We come seeking alliance, not to witness internal squabbles, Lady Lyra stated, her Norse heavily accented but understandable. Though I admit, this is not what I expected from the famous Norse jarls and kings. Her gaze fell upon Ragnar, standing awkwardly with the crown upon his head. A flicker of interest crossed her features. Your crown, she said. It bears markings similar to artifacts found in our Christian monasteries. Ancient things, from before the time of Christ. This statement caused murmurs throughout the hall. That a Saxon would recognize the crown's power added a new dimension to the already tense situation. Jarl Halvard, ever the diplomat, quickly redirected attention. The Lady Lyra comes with an offer from King Ethelred of Northumbria. We shall hear it on the morrow. Tonight, we feast and welcome our guests. The emphasis on the last word was not lost on anyone present. The Saxons were enemies, though occasionally trading partners. Their presence here was extraordinary. That night, as the feast raged around him, Ragnar found himself seated at the high table, a position of honor he had never imagined occupying. The crown remained on his head, impossible to remove in public without losing what little standing he had. Lady Lyra sat across from him, occasionally glancing his way with curious eyes. "They say your crown chose you," she said quietly during a momentary lull in the surrounding conversations. "In my land, we believe God chooses kings." "And what does your God say about a farm boy becoming king?" Ragnar asked. A smile touched her lips. "Our holiest book tells of a shepherd boy named David who became Israel's greatest king. Perhaps your gods and my God are not so different in whom they favor." Before Ragnar could respond, Thorstein approached, his face flushed with mead and anger. "Tomorrow, sheep tender, you face me in the circle of challenge," he announced loudly. "Unless you wish to renounce this foolishness now and return to your mud and manure." The hall fell silent, all eyes on Ragnar. He felt the weight of the crown, the expectations of all present, and something else, a stirring of something ancient and powerful within him. "I accept your challenge," he heard himself say, his voice steadier than he felt. "Let the gods decide." As Thorstein stalked away, satisfied, Lady Lyra leaned forward again. "That was either very brave or very foolish," she observed. "He has killed 17 men in single combat." "Then I shall be the 18th, Ragnar replied, though his stomach churned with fear. "Unless the gods will it otherwise." That night, alone in the small chamber he had been assigned, Ragnar removed the crown and examined it. The runes etched into its surface were ancient, some unlike any he had seen before. As he traced them with his finger, they began to glow faintly, and knowledge flowed into his mind, sword forms, battle strategies, the weight and balance of different weapons. "Odin," he whispered, "if this is your will, grant me strength for tomorrow." The following dawn, the entire settlement gathered around the fighting circle, a ring of stones where challenges were traditionally settled. Ragnar stood at one end, dressed in borrowed leather armor that fit poorly over his lanky frame. Across from him, Thorstein cut an impressive figure in mail, a sword and shield ready in his hands. Jarl Halvard stepped to the center of the ring. This challenge will determine whether the Raven Crown has chosen wisely. If Ragnar falls, the crown returns to its burial mound until another is chosen. If Thorstein falls, all must accept the crown's choice. He looked between the two men. Fight until one yields or can no longer continue. May the gods favor the worthy. As the Jarl stepped back, Ragnar placed the crown upon his head. Immediately, a change came over him. His posture straightened, his eyes focused with an intensity that made several onlookers step back. When he was handed a sword and shield, he tested their weight with the confidence of a seasoned warrior. Thorstein attacked immediately, expecting an easy victory. To everyone's astonishment, especially Ragnar's, he parried the blow with practiced ease. His body moved as though guided by unseen hands, countering Thorstein's aggressive style with a fluid defense that gradually shifted to offense. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the farm boy and the seasoned warrior circled each other. Blood flowed from minor cuts on both men, but neither gained a decisive advantage until Ragnar executed a complex feint that no one present had ever seen, a technique from a forgotten age. Thorstein's sword flew from his hand, and Ragnar's blade rested against his throat. "Do you yield?" Ragnar asked, his voice sounding strange even to himself, deeper, more commanding. Thorstein's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "Seer," he spat. "Witchcraft. No farm boy fights like that. Do you yield?" Ragnar repeated, pressing the blade slightly closer. "I yield," Thorstein growled, his eyes promising future retribution. As Ragnar stepped back, the crowd erupted, some cheering, others muttering about magic and trickery. Among the faces, he spotted Lady Lyra, her expression a mixture of awe and suspicion. Beside her stood her Saxon guards, hands on their weapons, clearly unsettled by what they had witnessed. Jarl Halvard approached Ragnar, kneeling formally before him. "The crown has chosen, and the challenge is met," he announced. I recognize Ragnar Drengsson as the rightful bearer of the Raven Crown and heir to the ancient throne of King Sigurd Ringa. One by one, the other jarls and warriors present came forward to kneel, some willingly, others with clear reluctance. The coronation would come later, but this acknowledgement was the first step toward legitimate rule. As the crowd dispersed, Lady Lyra approached him, her guards following at a respectful distance. "Impressive display, King Ragnar," she said, studying him with those mismatched eyes. "Though I wonder, was that you fighting, or something inside you?" Ragnar, still breathing heavily from the exertion, met her gaze directly. "Both, I think. The crown gives knowledge, but the arm that wields the sword is still mine." "Dangerous knowledge," she observed. "In my land, we are taught to be wary of such gifts. They often come with hidden costs." "And what is the cost of the alliance you seek with the very people who raid your shores?" Ragnar countered. A small smile played at her lips. "Perhaps we shall discover the costs together, King Ragnar. My father seeks peace through strength, a northern border secured by alliance rather than constant bloodshed." "And how do you propose to seal such an alliance?" he asked, though he suspected the answer. "In the usual way," she replied evenly. "Marriage between our peoples." Though I had expected to be offered to a seasoned jarl, not a newly crowned farm boy. Before Ragnar could respond, Jarl Halvard approached, ending their conversation. "The thing must convene to discuss your coronation and the Saxon proposal," he informed Ragnar. "We gather at midday." As Lyra departed with a formal nod, Ragnar felt a strange mixture of emotions: triumph from the victory, uncertainty about his new position, and an undeniable attraction to the Saxon woman who represented everything his people traditionally opposed. The thing's deliberations were heated. Many of the elder jarls opposed an alliance with Northumbria, preferring the traditional way of raiding. Others saw the strategic advantage in peace with at least one Saxon kingdom, allowing them to focus their raids elsewhere. "An alliance through marriage is one thing," argued Jarl Gunnar, an old raider with a reputation for brutality. "But to a Christian? The gods would be insulted." "The gods chose me through this crown," Ragnar countered, finding confidence in his new role. "Perhaps they have plans beyond our understanding." The debate raged on until Ragnar raised his hand for silence, a gesture that, to his surprise, was immediately obeyed. "I will meet with Lady Lyra privately to discuss terms," he decided. "Before we vote on this matter, I would know her true intentions, and those of her father." That evening, Ragnar received Lady Lyra in a small chamber off the main hall. Her guards remained outside, as did his own newly appointed housecarls, men assigned to him by Jarl Halvard, who watched him with a mixture of respect and suspicion. "Your rise has been meteoric," Lyra observed as she sat across from him at a small table. 3 days ago, a farmer. Today, negotiating with foreign powers. "The gods work in strange ways," Ragnar replied. "Now tell me truly, what does Alderman Sutton hope to gain from marrying his daughter to a Norse king?" Lyra's composed expression flickered briefly. "My father is practical. The raids have weakened Northumbria for generations. An alliance with a Norse king, especially one who might unite the quarreling jarls, could bring peace to our shores and prosperity through trade rather than plunder." "And you?" Ragnar asked more softly. "What do you hope to gain?" Her mismatched eyes met his directly. "I was raised to serve my people's interests. Personal desires are secondary. That doesn't answer my question." A smile touched her lips. "No, it doesn't." She leaned forward slightly. "I hope to gain knowledge. Your people possess skills and wisdom unknown in my land. I've studied the old languages, the runes, the stories. There is power in them that our Christian priests deny but cannot explain away." This admission surprised Ragnar. "You risk much telling me this." "Your priests would call it heresy." "Yes," she agreed simply. "But something tells me you understand the pursuit of forbidden knowledge." The conversation shifted to practical matters: trade routes, protection agreements, and the terms of a potential marriage alliance. Yet throughout, an undercurrent of mutual fascination flowed between them. As their meeting concluded, Lyra paused at the door. Your crown, she said. I've seen its like before, in an illuminated manuscript at Lindisfarne Monastery, before your people destroyed it. The monks called it the crown of the North Wind. They claimed it contained the soul of an ancient king who would one day return. With those unsettling words, she departed, leaving Ragnar to contemplate the growing complexity of his situation. That night, Ragnar dreamed vividly. He stood on a battlefield strewn with the dead, ravens circling overhead. Before him stood a massive figure, a one-eyed old man leaning on a spear. "You wear my gift well, young Ragnar," the figure said, his voice like distant thunder. "Odin," Ragnar whispered, falling to one knee. "Rise," commanded the All-Father. "I did not choose you to kneel, but to lead. Dark times approach. The white Christ gains ground, and the old ways fade. You stand at the crossroads of worlds. What would you have me do?" Ragnar asked. "Unite the North under the Raven Crown," Odin replied. "But beware, the Saxon woman has her own destiny, woven by powers even I must respect. Your paths are intertwined, though whether in harmony or discord remains to be seen." Ragnar woke with a start, dawn light filtering through the small window of his chamber. The dream felt more real than the room around him. In the following weeks, Ragnar's education in kingship proceeded rapidly. The crown continued to impart ancient knowledge, while Jarl Halvard, seeing advantage in supporting the new king, provided practical guidance in politics and leadership. Ragnar's natural intelligence, combined with the crown's influence, made him a quick study. Meanwhile, Lady Lyra remained in Kaupang as negotiations continued. Though they maintained formal relations in public, private conversations between them grew increasingly personal. Ragnar learned of her childhood in Bebenberg Castle, raised by her widowed father and educated alongside her brothers, unusual for a Saxon woman. She, in turn, heard of his years as a farmer's son, secretly studying runes and dreaming of a larger world. Their growing closeness did not go unnoticed. Thorstein, still smarting from his defeat, spread rumors of witchcraft and Saxon plots. Some whispered that the Christian woman was seducing the new king to weaken him from within. The tension came to a head during the spring blot, the sacrifice to ensure fertility for the coming planting season. As king, Ragnar was expected to lead the ritual, sacrificing a fine bull to the gods and blessing the fields with its blood. Lady Lyra and her Christian entourage were invited to observe but not participate. As the ritual began, Ragnar felt the power of the crown surge through him. Words in an ancient dialect of Norse flowed from his lips as he raised the sacrificial knife. From the crowd, a voice suddenly called out, "See how the Christian witch turns our king from the true faith. He speaks the words, but his heart is turned to her foreign god." It was Thorstein, drunk and belligerent. Before guards could restrain him, he rushed forward, drawing his sword. "I challenge the false king again. The gods demand it." The crowd fell into chaos. Some supported Thorstein's challenge, others defended their new king. In the confusion, no one noticed a Saxon guard draw a small crossbow until the bolt was flying, aimed directly at Ragnar's heart. Without conscious thought, Ragnar raised his hand. The bolt stopped in mid-air, hovering inches from his chest, then fell harmlessly to the ground. A collective gasp rose from the assembled Norse. "Seer," someone shouted. "The king is a sorcerer." Ragnar stood transfixed, as shocked as anyone by what had just occurred. The crown burned hot upon his brow, and for a moment, he felt as though someone else looked out through his eyes. Through the chaos, he spotted Lady Lyra's face, not frightened, but intensely focused, as though witnessing the confirmation of a long-held theory. Their eyes met across the distance, and in that moment, something passed between them, an understanding beyond words. Guards subdued Thorstein and seized the Saxon archer. The ritual was abandoned, the crowd dispersing in fear and confusion. Jarl Halvard quickly took control, ordering the Saxon delegation confined to their quarters while the Thing convened to discuss this unprecedented event. Later that night, ignoring his advisor's warnings, Ragnar went alone to speak with Lady Lyra. He found her chambers guarded by his own men, who reluctantly allowed him entry. She stood by the window, gazing at the stars. When she turned to face him, her expression was composed but her eyes intense. "Your archer tried to kill me," Ragnar stated flatly. "Not mine," she replied immediately. "Cuthbert was paid by someone in your court." Under questioning, he confessed as much. "And you believe him?" "I do." "Had I wished you dead, King Ragnar, there are subtler methods than an arrow in public." She stepped closer. "What happened today, the bolt stopping midair, was no trick of the light. The crown's power protected you." Ragnar removed the crown, holding it between them. "This thing, it changes me. Sometimes I feel like another mind lives within my own, guiding my actions, my words." "The soul of King Sigurd," Lyra whispered. "The legends say he was a master of Gulda, runic magic. Some claimed he was Odin's son. How does a Christian noblewoman know so much of pagan magic?" Ragnar asked, though he already suspected the answer. Lyra hesitated, then reached beneath her dress, withdrawing a pendant that had been hidden beneath her clothes. It bore not a Christian cross, but a complex runic symbol. "My mother was Norse," she revealed quietly. "Taken in a raid as a young woman, she eventually married my father and converted to Christianity. But in secret, she taught me the old ways, the runes, the stories of the gods. I am Saxon by birth but carry Norse blood in my veins." This revelation changed everything. A political marriage suddenly held new possibility, not just alliance, but understanding. "If your people knew," Ragnar began. "I would be condemned as a heretic," she finished. "Just as your people would reject you if they believed you truly controlled Seer, not just benefited from the crown's protection. Men who practice such magic are considered urgy, unmanly. So we both have secrets," Ragnar concluded. "Yes," she agreed. "And perhaps that is why the Norns have woven our threads together." Before they could speak further, shouting erupted in the courtyard below. Looking out the window, they saw torches approaching the hall, a mob led by Thorstein, who had apparently escaped his confinement. "Death to the Sorcerer King and his Saxon witch," came the cry. Ragnar quickly placed the crown back on his head. "Stay here," he commanded, heading for the door. "No," Lyra countered, producing a small knife from her sleeve. "My fate is my own to face." Together they descended to the main hall, where loyal housecarls were already preparing to defend against the approaching mob. Jarl Halvard arrived moments later, armed and armored despite the late hour. "Thorstein has gathered malcontents and those who oppose change," he reported grimly. "They number perhaps 40. We have 20 men here." "I will not spill Norse blood if it can be avoided," Ragnar declared, moving toward the main doors. "Open them. I would speak to my people." Against the Jarl's advice, the doors were thrown wide. Ragnar stepped forward, unarmed except for the crown upon his head. The mob's advance faltered at the sight of him standing calmly before them. "Is this how the people of Vestfold treat their king?" he called out, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "With midnight mobs and drunken threats? No king who practices woman's magic deserves the crown." Thorstein shouted back. "The gods reject you." "Do they?" Ragnar challenged. As if in answer to his words, the night sky above suddenly erupted with the most magnificent display of northern lights anyone present had ever witnessed. Curtains of green and blue light danced across the heavens, forming, to those who looked closely, the shapes of ravens in flight. The mob fell silent, many dropping to their knees in fear and awe. "The gods chose me through this crown," Ragnar continued, his voice steady. "Not for my strength in battle, though it has given me that. Not for my noble blood, for I have none. But perhaps for my willingness to forge new paths while honoring the old ways." He gestured toward Lyra, who had come to stand beside him. "You fear I am bewitched by this Saxon woman. The truth is simpler, and more complex. She carries Norse blood in her veins, knows our ways, respects our gods alongside her Christ. An alliance with her father's lands would bring prosperity without weakness." Thorstein, undeterred, pushed forward. "Pretty words from a farm boy. If the gods truly favor you, prove it. Face me again, this time without your magic crown." A murmur ran through the crowd. Even some of Ragnar's supporters looked troubled by this challenge. To refuse would seem cowardly, to accept would mean facing a seasoned warrior without the crown's protection. Before Ragnar could respond, Lyra stepped forward. "In Northumbria, we have a custom for settling such disputes," she announced. "The ordeal by fire. If the gods, or God, favor a person, they can hold heated iron without harm." This proposal caused considerable stir. The Norse were familiar with such ordeals, though they were not common practice. "Let both men undergo the ordeal," Lyra suggested. "Let the gods show whom they truly favor." Ragnar understood her strategy immediately. If the crown's magic protected him, as it had from the arrow, he could pass this test. For Thorstein, it would mean severe burns unless the gods intervened directly. "I accept this ordeal," Ragnar declared. Thorstein, trapped by his own challenge and the crowd's expectation, reluctantly agreed. A brazier was brought forth and a piece of iron heated until it glowed red. The crowd gathered around as Ragnar removed the crown, handing it to Jarl Halvard for safekeeping. Without its physical presence, he felt suddenly vulnerable, yet something of its power seemed to linger within him. Thorstein went first, grasping the heated iron with a grimace of determination. His scream pierced the night as the metal seared his flesh. When he released it, his palm was blistered and raw. "The gods have spoken," someone in the crowd called out. Then it was Ragnar's turn. As he approached the brazier, he felt a strange calm descend upon him. Reaching out, he grasped the glowing iron firmly. Heat radiated through his hand, painful but bearable, as though filtered through some protective barrier. When he opened his palm to the crowd, it was reddened but unburned. The assembled people fell to their knees, even those who had moments before called for his death. Thorstein, clutching his injured hand, backed away in fear and shame. "The crown has chosen, and the gods have confirmed their choice," Jarl Halvard announced. "Let no one question King Ragnar's right to rule again." In the days that followed, word of the miraculous ordeal spread throughout the region, strengthening Ragnar's position considerably. The negotiations with Northumbria concluded successfully, with a formal alliance sealed by betrothal between Ragnar and Lady Lyra, the wedding to take place at midsummer. As spring turned to summer, Ragnar grew into his role as king. With Lyra's counsel, he implemented changes that improved trade, justice, and relations with neighboring territories. Though some traditionalists grumbled about foreign influence, most people saw only the increasing prosperity and stronger defenses that resulted from the alliance. The crown continued to impart knowledge, but Ragnar learned to control its influence rather than being controlled by it. Lyra's understanding of both Norse and Christian traditions helped bridge cultural gaps, while her knowledge of runes complemented the crown's more instinctive magic. One moon before their wedding day, as they walked along the fjord shore at sunset, Lyra revealed one final secret. "There is something you should know before we are wed," she said, her voice serious. "The manuscript I mentioned, about the crown of the North Wind, told not only of its power but of its purpose." Ragnar waited silently for her to continue. "It was forged during the time of the Great Migration, when our peoples first separated, the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes moving south, while others remained in the north. The crown was meant to reunite these kindred peoples someday, under a ruler who carried the wisdom of the ancients but the vision for a new future." She turned to face him directly. "You are not just king of Vestfold, Ragnar. The crown chose you to begin the reconciliation of peoples who have been enemies for centuries, not through conquest, but through alliance and understanding." Ragnar absorbed this revelation, feeling its truth resonate with the knowledge the crown had been gradually revealing to him. "This is why Odin led me to it," he said quietly. "Not to restore the old ways unchanged, but to build something new that honors their essence." "Yes," Lyra agreed. "And it is why my mother taught me the runes despite the danger, so I would be prepared when the time came." Their hands joined as they gazed across the fjord toward the setting sun. The future before them was uncertain, filled with challenges from both Norse traditionalists and Christian zealots who would oppose their vision of cultural harmony. Yet in that moment, with the crown's warmth upon his brow and Lyra's hand in his, Ragnar felt equal to the task the gods, and perhaps Lyra's god too, had set before them. The raven that had first led Ragnar to the burial mound swooped low overhead, cawing 3 times before disappearing into the gathering dusk, an affirmation from the Allfather himself that their path, though difficult, was true. On their wedding day at midsummer, as Ragnar and Lyra exchanged vows before representatives of both cultures, the skies above Kaupang once again erupted with the northern lights, a phenomenon unprecedented in summer months. Those present, whether they followed the old gods or the White Christ, recognized it as a sign of divine blessing upon the union. And so began the reign of Ragnar Drengsson, the farm boy who became king, and his queen Lyra, who bridged 2 worlds, their love story not just a tale of personal passion, but the first thread in a new tapestry of unity for the peoples of the North.